professor and I, Dr. Adaldo Zanella, he would always see these people walking around Anthony Hall practicing their reasons for horse judging and livestock judging and dairy judging. And he would say, why can't we get that kind of energy to think about animal welfare? And so we put on our thinking caps and we finally came up with a way that we could come up with hypothetical scenarios to have students judge welfare. So for example, we might put together a PowerPoint slide presentation and compare Dairy Farm 1 to Dairy Farm 2, have a whole bunch of physiological indicators, quite a number of behavioral indicators, and then ask students to make an assessment of which farm has higher welfare, and then now you have 3 minutes to explain your decision. We just last night returned from this year's welfare judging competition. Most of the years we've held it at Michigan State. This year it was at University of Guelph in Ontario. I've actually got at least 3 of the students plus my assistant coach, wave your hands guys, here from the team. And so yeah, it was kind of a long day yesterday. Also Dr. Carla Carlton, I don't know if Dalen Agnew is here, but those are the 2 coaches for the veterinary team. So anyway, it was a long weekend, but a very fun weekend, and anybody that wants to find out more about that welfare judging competition, I'm happy to talk to you about it. I do have to leave shortly after this to go teach, but I'm real easy to find my email address. It's just heleski@msu.edu. And I'm going to have Janice talk a little bit more about the scenario development.
Okay, I'll apologize in advance if I have to stop and cough occasionally. Cold season has definitely hit me. As Camie said, we started this to kind of emulate the practice of dairy judging, horse judging, livestock judging, etc. So when we develop these scenarios, we go at it a little bit differently because we're really looking at context as well as the animals. So they're focusing not just on the body condition score and conformation of a particular animal, but going beyond that to see what conditions the animal is living in, how it's managed, etc. So basically, the method that we use for preparing scenarios is to do a lot of research to make sure that we're coming up with something that's realistic, usually is pretty hypothetical. We may base it loosely on an existing farm or an existing zoo exhibit or something like that, but we usually want to tweak it so that we can make some differences clearly evident between the 2 scenarios, or so we can make things confusingly similar, but sort of apples and oranges between the 2 scenarios. We use scientific literature as much as we can to highlight welfare differences that we know are quantifiable. Sometimes, though, there honestly hasn't been enough literature. Last year we had to do a scenario on parakeets, and there weren't necessarily as many welfare indicators for parakeets as there are for dairy cows or dogs or horses, etc. So we've done a variety of different species. We did start with traditional livestock species, but we've since branched out into a lot of exotic animals, into pet animals, into laboratory animals. The scenario that we're going to talk about today actually compares an individual police dog to an individual guide dog. So sometimes we do focus them on a single animal. Other times we focus them on a whole farm or a whole zoo exhibit or something like that. So really you can come up with hypothetical scenarios in about 1 million different ways. You can focus on the whole life of the animal, just one specific aspect of life history. You can focus on outcome measures, input measures. You can do it in a variety of different ways. So as we work through this scenario, you'll kind of get a sense for how we build them based on what information is here, and then how the students work through them as well. Anything else we need to add? Give their instructions.
Okay, so we're actually going to ask you guys to be students for a moment, and as we go through the scenario, Lena, do they have this in their packet? No. Okay. I think this is something that's going to be available online after the fact, but what we'll do is we'll go through the scenario. Janice may mention a few comments about some of the slides, but basically we're going to go through at the speed at which we think it's going to take you to read it. So you might want to jot down a couple little notes or at least make mental notes and try to decide in your mind, do you think the guide dog or the police dog has better welfare? And then Janice and I, after that, are each going to take aside and present why we think one or the other comes out a little bit ahead.
Okay, so we'll start with the first slide. I'm going to just kind of read through it. Read through it in my head as we go along, and then I'll advance to the next slide. If there's any really particularly difficult slides, what I typically do for the students is go back to those slides, give you guys a couple of minutes to think about it, and then we'll talk through. Okay, second slide. Okay, next slide. You'll notice that there's metric as well as standard units, depending on what you're more comfortable with. That's because we're in international contest usually. Okay, next slide. Okay, next. Okay, next slide. Okay, next one. Okay, next slide. next. Next slide. Next. Next slide. Okay, next. Okay, next slide. Okay, next. Next. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, next. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's the end of the scenario. I'm going to go back to that time budget slide really quickly because I think that was the most complicated bugger. Dark blue is active work, light blue is inactive work, green is eat, pink is play, light blue is rest, and yellow is other. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick poll from you guys based on all those slides you just saw regarding what your overall assessment is for who has the better welfare. We're gonna take this poll now, and then Camie and I are gonna weigh in, each giving some reasons for each dog. And then after we each give our reasons in favor of each dog, we'll let you know what the overall judge's assessment was for this scenario, okay? So, if I can see a show of hands for who thinks the police dog has the better welfare. Oh boy, okay. Well, that's okay. And how about the guide dog? Okay, very interesting. All right, Cam, you want to take the police dog first?
Sure. Do you want me to back it up?
So my students are going to call me out on this because normally I only let them have a 4x6 card, and I've got 2 pages here. So sorry guys, it's do as I say, not as I do. All right, in this welfare assessment scenario of working dogs, I placed the police dog's welfare as higher than the guide dog's, recognizing though that both dogs overall appear to have a very high level of welfare. Both shepherds and retrievers typically have a high motivation for locomotion activity, but the police dog has more opportunity to express this very strongly motivated behavior. This dog has a daily run with his primary person, opportunities to play with the family's children, and opportunities for at-liberty ranging in the fenced-in yard. A 2.5 body condition score in a working dog is considered highly appropriate and desirable. Though we are not given long-term health outcomes, it could be predicted that this slightly lean body condition score would reduce risk for joint problems, especially as compared to the 3.5 body condition score of the guide dog. Furthermore, most research would support meal feeding for an adult dog over ad-lib feeding. The police dog has more overall social opportunities, ranging from a conspecific in the home that he rests with, to a broader range of immediate family members that he interacts with, to interactions with other police officers when not actively working. Both breeds in this scenario are highly people-social breeds, and it would be expected that this creates a significant positive for the police dog. One of the greatest welfare advantages for the police dog comes at the time of retirement. The police dog is allowed to stay with his familiar home, with his familiar family, whereas the guide dog goes to a new family and needs to adapt to new people, new accommodations, and new routines. Both dogs are well suited to the jobs they are involved in. Both dogs overall have many positive features in their welfare. I do feel both dogs, being out in the public quite often, should have more to tell a vaccine, and at this point only the police dog receives that. Since there can be some debate amongst the use of parasite management and some discussion about overkill in some regards, I don't automatically rank the police dog higher than the guide dog in terms of more intensive year-round parasite control. It would be more telling if we knew the actual internal and external parasite loads. Certainly the police dog has the advantage in terms of dental care and prevention of dental problems. I will readily grant that the nail trimming protocol for the guide dog causes less stress than that of the police dog. However, this is a short-term, relatively infrequent stressor and does not change my overall placing. In addition, there are often temperament differences in dogs when it comes to protocols such as nail trimming. A further grant could be a milder training style with emphasis on positive reinforcement with a guide dog. However, having watched many police dogs in training, providing the timing and fairness of negative reinforcement and punishment are good and have been provided by knowledgeable trainers, I'm very comfortable with this style of training. In conclusion, though both working dogs appear to have highly acceptable levels of welfare, I place the police dog over the guide dog.
Camie has very formal livestock judging training, as you'll see. So, I will be ranking the guide dog above, the guide dog's welfare above that of the police dog for the following main reasons: for the rearing environment, for the training protocols, and also for the dog's comfort with home care procedures. So both dogs were bred professionally for the purposes for which they were intended. However, their initial rearing environments were very different. The guide dog was immediately taken after weaning and placed in a home where it was allowed to be accustomed to different scenarios and situations. And in fact, part of the requirement of guide dog fostering is that you can expose pups to as many different situations as possible. So this dog was well socialized during the pup period and received a wide variety of stimuli and training in the home environment. The police dog, on the other hand, was reared in a breeding kennel situation until it began training more formally. So this type of a rearing environment, while there could be some situations in which this may be different, largely leaves the dog in more of a confined situation with less external socialization to other people, to other situations, and to dogs beyond the breeding kennel. With regard to training itself, there are definitely differences between the two situations, with a wider range of training styles being used for the police dog, some of which have been shown to have detrimental effects to dog stress levels and to future compliance for their performance of their tasks. So the guide dog was receiving training that was largely positive reinforcement based and including some food and some petting and treat rewards. The police dog, on the other hand, could have been subjected to correction ranging from verbal to possible physical correction. While these may not in themselves be immediately negative, they could be stressful for the dog if the dog is of a sensitive temperament or if they're applied incorrectly or overly harshly. With regard to the nutrition, the guide dog is available, has water available to it ad libitum throughout the day. The owner carries along a water bowl for providing the dog with water regularly, so this dog never becomes dehydrated. The police dog, on the other hand, is water restricted. And while this could be a little bit of a benefit, especially if this police dog is doing really high active chasing, in which case a full stomach of water would be uncomfortable, on the majority of days that this dog is working, this may result in the dog becoming slightly dehydrated. So I would rank the guide dog above the police dog for regular provision of water throughout the day. With regard to veterinary care, the guide dog lives in Oregon, where heartworm is maybe not as prevalent as it is in areas such as Virginia, where the police dog is a resident, and so it might be appropriate to only have a partial year-round heartworm schedule for this dog. It would be important, though, to determine what the actual prevalence of heartworm is in the area to make sure that this was an appropriate protocol. The guide dog appears to be actually enjoying all of its home care routine in terms of being very accepting and actually maybe even soliciting of some of the procedures that are being performed on it. Definitely shows no adverse reactions either behaviorally or physiologically to being bathed, groomed, or even to the procedure of nail trimming. This could be due to the fact that two different methods of nail trimming are used, with the guide dog receiving a grinding trim, which may be more or less likely to cut to the quick, which could have happened to the police dog. But given the dog's responses to this procedure, which recurs on a monthly basis, I would say that the guide dog has better welfare in this regard. As far as the retirement procedure goes, I would actually argue in favor of the guide dog in this case, because the dog is taken from the owner, placed in a new home where the dog now gets to be solely a pet dog and is not remaining with an owner but no longer in its accustomed role. So the police dog will remain in the home to which he's accustomed to, true, but will also have to have another dog come in that is now fulfilling the primary role of working with his human caregiver. So he's going to be less attached to that human caregiver than he was previously, and may suffer from feelings of displacement and have a different hierarchy that needs to be worked out. The guide dog, while there will be definitely severing of the attachment between the owner and being placed in a new home, will now be in a very different condition and will not have any competing issues relative to the police dog versus the new incoming dog. I do think that both dogs do overall have a very good level of welfare. Both receive adequate nutrition. No body condition scores are outside of an acceptable range. Both do come from very good breeding programs, and as evidenced by their passing of the fairly strict criteria required to become either a guide dog or police dog, should not have too many issues with joints or eyes or things of that nature as they proceed. Both have acceptable temperaments, and both do live in situations where a retirement plan at least is in place past the end of their working life. So with all of those considerations, I would still place the guide dog over the police dog, although I would say that this is by a fairly slim margin.
So this scenario was purposely designed to be fairly close. Some of the scenarios we designed to be, quite a significant cut as far as being very distinctly different. Others, it's really kind of fun to see them be close and really make the students work hard as they assess through.
And the judges.
This one made the judges work.
Yeah, actually, I believe Catherine Hout was one of the judges.
And so was Lena.
And Lena was one of the judges on this. So actually, you can talk about how the judges placed this.
There was a lot of debate among the judges, actually, with this scenario. And part of it had to do with the fact that there were differences in retirement outcomes, and I've actually made those a bit clearer now than they were in the original scenario. So I tried to alter it a little bit just because we wanted to make it a little bit clearer. But the judges basically were split as to which situation was better. Camie and I pointed out a lot of the major points, but another thing that we maybe didn't bring up was the length of the working day. So for the guide dog, the length of the working day, am I losing the batteries here? Okay. The working day for the guide dog is a bit longer and a bit more intense in some ways than the police dog. So this dog is kind of on call all the time throughout the working day. So from the time when that dog leaves the house in the morning until the owner comes back at the end of the evening, that dog is wearing the harness and is responsible for being in a working mentality. Whereas the police dog, when he's out on patrol, is definitely working, but when he comes back to the station, is in a more relaxed situation and is sort of able to interact with officers, etc. So the length of the individual working day was a bit different too, and I don't think we highlighted that. Lena, I remember, I think you were in favor of the police dog, and Dr. What was that?
The beef judge was in favor of the police dog.
And Dr. You were in favor of the guide dog, I believe. So we did have a split decision between two of our judges. Sorry that the microphone seems to be cutting in and out on me. So it was really close, and both of them said that they could potentially go either way if there were a few small things that were tweaked on either side. So this scenario, there's a bit of subjectivity here, depending on how strongly you weigh elements like the training environment, the rearing environment versus the retirement, and some of those things like that. So sometimes it can be quite close in terms of what aspects you take into consideration and how you weigh things. And as Camie said, sometimes we make the scenarios much more clear-cut. So in this case, both the dogs did have pretty good vet care, pretty good nutrition, although we can see that the guide dog does get a little bit chubby and has ad-lib food and has less socialization on a daily basis. So, anything else you want to add, Camie? Okay, yeah, any questions, I guess, from you guys? So, what do you think? Agreements, disagreements? Dan?
I'm surprised that you didn't talk about job safety for either.
Job security?
Safety.
Oh, safety, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Definitely with the police dog, we have risks potentially if this dog is on duty and is patrolling and is doing officer protection particularly, or actually even on a narcotics sniff. This dog could be encountering armed fugitives potentially and be shot at. And we definitely have some statistics on what the rate is of police dogs being injured in the line of work. Of course, on the other hand, with the guide dog, this dog works till it's 10 or 12 years of age, right? So there is possibility that by the time that this dog hits the end of its working career, it could have impaired vision or hearing as well, and may not be as safe for leading someone across the street as a younger dog. So there could potentially be risks for the guide dog, although they're probably less dramatic than those seen by the police dog.
Not as controversial as the cat scenario.
Oh dear.
Plus we're keeping them from their coffee break, I think.
Yes, that's probably true.
Your welfare is being impaired because you need coffee, right?
White shirt.
Is the mic on? So the scenario that you represent, you contend that these are accurate depictions of the average guide dog versus the average police dog?
Yes, I did. I prepared this scenario, and I did a ton of background work. We actually got some input from a local police dog trainer, and we also had some contacts on the guide dog side for folks who had fostered guide dogs, etc. So we did quite a bit of extensive searching in the literature and talking to folks that work with both of these types of situations to try and make that as realistic as possible, especially with regard to like the daily schedule and the training and different things like that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I was surprised to find that most of the audience thought that the police dog had a better lifestyle. If I could suggest that, having worked with leader dogs for 25 years, that there are a number of aspects that are incorrect, and it may be, because I don't want people to leave here with the impression that that which you presented was accurate. So if I could correct a few things.
Sure.
Dogs are not fed ad lib. They're encouraged to provide home dental care. They are socialized at some parts during the day when they can take their harness off. they do have a chance to play at night when they have a harness on. They're not required to leave the home when they're retired. They can stay in the homes. They're not neutered at 4 weeks of age. They're groomed daily, and I guess that's about it. But, and there are two different types of dogs. Dogs that go into police work, there's different nature and type of dog than the one that goes to guide work.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
I don't mean to be defensive, but if people are leaving here thinking the wrong thing about guide dogs, I wouldn't like that to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've got, any more questions?
Oh.
Okay. Oh, okay. Valerie's got a question.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment in regards to the police dog. Again, just as a clarification, like the gentleman over here, I make some comments that we see almost all police departments come into the service of Michigan State. And with that, they only come once per year, not twice per year as you listed for the annual exams. Also, the majority of dogs actually live outside, not in the house, with the police officers and their families. And when they come over from another country, usually they're about a year to 18 months of age, they're in pretty rough shape. So I felt like a number of liberties were taken, even though you've done some research on that the police dogs that we see coming in, I wouldn't quite agree with the scenario that you had. So I just wanted to kind of share some background on that from our experience working with them.
Okay.
I guess it just points out the vast differences in perceptions of welfare issues from different people in different places, and yeah, okay. We're gonna have a 30-minute break while we set up for the cattle handling demo. Question? Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Is it on? Okay. I'm like super embarrassed because I have been involved with this for the last 3 years now. This past year I've been the assistant coach, and I just want to kind of give them a little bit of encouragement that it might not be as horrible as maybe the scenario makes some people feel. One of the great things about this is that it makes you can't take the background information that you have to look at the scenario that's presented to you. And this is looking at two particular individuals that don't represent all of the individual police dogs and all of the individual guide dogs. And that's part of what we learn as the students in this contest, is how to kind of step away from what we want to believe and what we think is right, and learn that we have to look at each situation for its own. And so I just want to kind of point that out, that it's not always just supposed to represent everybody.
Excellent point, Sarah Beth.
So we have a police dog that's above par and a guide dog that may be below par, according to what our expert testimony has been. But as we all know, there's a ton of variability in any of these systems, right? You could conceivably have someone that's treated a police dog that well, and you could conceivably have someone that's not following the guidelines and feeding their guide dog ad lib. So, with that, we'll let you guys have some coffee and improve your own welfare.